I am very happy today to be joined by Eddie, who is a global cannabis consultant. He's going to be talking to us about, guess what? Cannabis. So, Eddie, how did you get to become a global cannabis consultant?
Hi, yes. In 1996, when California passed Proposition 420, was my first working with cannabis in the medicinal cannabis space. That was in California. Uh, they were actually the first state to pass medical marijuana, and I had a lot of friends in the Emerald Triangle that were, catering to the black market, that were transitioning into this medical market that we have today. Um, I worked as a harvester and a processor, and kind of got my fingers wet in the space. In 2008, when Michigan passed, I opened Ed's Meds, which was Michigan's first dispensary that was under the caregiver patient law structure at the time. I was a caregiver. I had 12 patients, 6 plants per patient, 72 plant operations each caregiver had back in the day. So then was you had to be very strict in being compliant with the law. I took 9 other caregivers, and we combined our operation into a 720 plant operation. Each room was separated by our license, and
Can you
we
explain what a caregiver? So, as a
yes,
caregiver, you were allowed or entitled to grow a certain number of plants.
exactly. Michigan structured this
Never heard of that.
caregiver. Yes, it's a
Yeah.
caregiver patient law structure, and it was based on 12 plants per patient. And it was obviously a bit muddled, but because you were allowed to have 15 ounces per patient as well. And, odd number, because 16 is,
15 ounces each. Wow.
and, 16 ounces is a pound. So it was weird. We'd called the 15 ounces the Michigan medical pound at the time. But, yeah, so we were responsible for growing the cannabis for our patients. The whatever deal you had set up between you and your patient was on an individual basis. The law didn't address that. And I took it a step further by joining with 9 other caregivers, and we went to a central location. We had 10 grow rooms with 72 plants each for our patients. The problem was, of course, with that many plants, you produce far more than 15 ounces.
No,
So,
never. Yeah.
so under the law, you were supposed to just provide for your patient. However, um, you could technically sell to a licensed patient, who was, when we say licensed, it means somebody that was approved by the state to have medical cannabis. So, started growing cannabis.
So you in effect became like a self-sufficient mini clinic, little mini clinic and pharmacy where you could grow it and then you can sell it to a registered, recognized patient. So you're a little industry there.
Yes, yes, exactly.
It's easy.
When you compare it to the UK structure, it is very much like that. And I personally, so when I set that up, I worked directly with the Hemp and Cannabis Foundation. The Hemp and Cannabis Foundation was an organization out of Oregon that went state to state as states became legal, and they would set up an office with a doctor who would help facilitate medical licenses. So that was great. And they helped educate people, and so many people were new to medicating with cannabis. Some people had never used cannabis before, and the last thing you want is somebody to have a terrible experience, to possibly over medicate, and just not really receive the benefits. So, working with that organization, I started educating patients. I personally set up a um, free meds program for anyone that was terminally ill or suffering from central nervous system disorders like Parkinson's and MS.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, and anyone who was undergoing chemo also was eligible for free meds from Ed's Meds. So that was really helpful. People really appreciated that. And then as, you know,
And what year was this roughly? Sorry?
2008, 2009.
8. And
Yeah, yeah.
and really it didn't become legal in California even till 2014, 16, right? So this was
Yeah, it
this
took
was quite a while before it became, let's say, mainstream. I mean, this 10 years before.
absolutely. No, we were
Huh.
pioneers for the industry. Um, Not always a great thing. Uh, it was very difficult as people, you know, here are experiencing now. You couldn't, you know, even though it was legal and we were allowed to possess it, the police still were raiding our homes. I personally had my home raided by the police because a neighbor could smell the cannabis, and, you know, the police first stole my trash and then found some piece of paper saying flower, you know, bud cycle started on a certain date, and that was enough for a judge to get a no-knock warrant. Next thing you know, my house is the front door is being kicked in, a circus of police are barreling into my house, hogtied me,
Yeah.
and then
And this was for providing cannabis to patients.
2 medical patients, and I was meticulous about being
Wow.
compliant with law. I actually had the, laws stapled to the grow room door.
Do not do that. Yeah, yeah. And they still
So when they came in and they took down everything and they took the cannabis and they took my grow equipment, I said, "I'm totally compliant." They said, "No, you have way too much cannabis here." I said, "That cannabis is curing," and it was marked as such. So you could have cannabis that was curing and not finished in this kind of interim state. It didn't count against your, you know, Michi
your 1 pack, your 15 out, yeah.
exactly, and I offered the police at the time to I said, "I have a scale here, let's weigh it so I can sign off on what you're taking, so we both agree." And the police said to me, "Don't worry, we're not gonna add any to it." And I said, "I wasn't worried until you said that." Um, Long story short, bought it for a year. Uh, they basically, it is the MO of, prosecutorial offices to put people through this financial stress and terrible scenario, and then they tossed it out. It was dismissed because they finally weighed it, and I was, you know,
And
compliant.
yeah, within what you could. And so all that hassle, all that stress.
And
Just
finance loss, mostly financial, and yeah, I had to replace the equipment, I had to replace the cannabis they stole, I had to engage an attorney, it was, you know, thousands of dollars, it was a terrible scenario, and then I was like, "Oh, you know, am I gonna continue to do this?" My motivation for doing it was my father had, uh, cancer, he passed away in 2001, the only thing that made him feel better with a table full of medicine was cannabis, um, so I was like, "No, I'm gonna continue to do this no matter,
Mm.
you know, how stressful and terrible it is at times." Um,
So you've I think we've established that over 20 years, you have gone from growing through medical, setting up your own little mini clinic, understanding the laws of Michigan better than the police did, and now you're into the business development. I know you work with a lot of companies, but what we were originally talking about was the fact that medical cannabis is being sold or touted as being cleaner than clean, it's far better for you than street weed. And I emphasize that because the Home Office in the UK at the moment lump together grow your own with street weed. They see the two things as being the same. That the danger of contaminants is high. Now, maybe there are people who are growing their own who don't realize. So maybe, it's maybe a fair point for a small number of people. But where we think of medical cannabis as being clean, we know that the majority of medical cannabis in the UK right now is derived from the same commercial growers that supply a lot of the rec market in Canada and the US. And some of those might be using fertilizers, PKRs, they might be using chemicals to boost the growth because that's the commercial pressure they're under. So what's your take on the whole, how clean should medical cannabis be? How much does it overlap with the commercial side?
Yes, yeah, yes, no, absolutely, and I'm a patient as well as a professional, and, you know, since the beginning, people have always asked me, "What is the difference between medical cannabis and recreational cannabis?" And clearly, just like you stated, there's none. There's no difference. There's there's no guidelines as far as medical cannabis has no pesticides, fungicides, herbicides, no contaminants. It's not a pure, clean product. In my opinion, especially as a patient, I feel that it should be. Um,
Yeah, what's the point, I suppose?
What is the point, and why does a doctor need to prescribe it? And, it's what makes it medical versus recreational? How do you separate the 2? And if there is no separation, then, it's kind of ridiculous. To me, medical cannabis should be grown contaminant-free. We have discussed this in the past. I personally believe that if it's medicine, there should be no contaminants whatsoever. And is it commercially viable? Yes. Yes, it is. Pharmaceutical manufacturers might say, no, no, it's not. We're growing, huge rooms of cannabis. And it is challenging, especially, old school growers like myself that went from a room of 72 plants to, 720 plants or more. Those were the challenges that someone like myself wasn't prepared to deal with, and immediately the industry started going down the same road as
But
big
did you
tech.
do it? I mean, you had 720 plants. Were you able to say hand on heart that I was able to grow these without
Absolutely,
organically, I suppose?
absolutely,
So it can be done.
yes, yes, it can be done, 100%.
Yeah,
Is it
yeah,
more costly, more challenging? Absolutely.
yeah.
Are there times that you might have to destroy the crop and start over? Yes. However, you're creating medicine for people who are sick. So in my opinion, if you're gonna prescribe it, you're gonna charge a premium, they have to go to a GP, they have to go through a pharmacy, they have to go through a clinic to get it, it should meet a higher standard than, it's certainly not street cannabis.
But
Uh,
let me counter that, not because I disagree, but just to put a counter argument that there's obviously price pressures, not least on from the patients themselves. Not everyone can afford. I know, name a high number. Everyone wants a lower number. So there are commercial pressures on the medical side as well. So how would you balance one against the other? Is it how low in price can a medical cannabis grower go and still maintain that quality? And I'm just putting you on the spot.
well, the current market, there are growers that are, their cannabis is down to 2 and 3 euros per
Yeah,
gram.
yeah.
So that's profitable, especially when I, as a patient, I know that I pay anywhere from £8.50 to £10 a gram.
There's a margin.
Yes. The margins are there. Um, is it as I said, it's definitely more costly, more challenging to grow without pesticides, fungicides, herbicides. If all the preventative maintenance, all the equipment, all the protocols are in place, you're starting from tissue culture with clean product, you can produce a contaminant-free end product. Um, and this is a plant that people are vaporizing in the UK. That is a unique thing about the UK, that the UK requires their cannabis patients to vaporize cannabis rather than smoke it,
That's right.
which is odd.
A doctor can't prescribe it for combusting, right? So officially, all the flower in the UK that's prescribed should be vaped. And I
Exactly.
say should in
Right, because they can't enforce it. They have no idea how the end user is actually consuming it. And where's the evidence that vaping is better than, smoking or um, eating edibles or consuming concentrates? The evidence isn't there. Vaping, the lack of combustion is why people lean towards it and say that it's better, which makes sense. I'm not saying that it is or it isn't. I know personally when I vaporize cannabis versus smoking it, it's has a different effect.
huh.
So you're
Can you
not
say
getting
what
all
those effects are? Can you what for you personally?
me for me personally when vaporize flower specifically, it's um it's lighter, the effects are lighter, and I feel that I personally, because I've consumed cannabis and all the way, that I've wasted the cannabis because I don't get the same effects that I would have had I smoked it. So, what
Spider is nodding away here. I think a lot of people are going, yeah, yeah.
because, then you're s
Cannabis make them flowers, baby.
that's right, 100%. So, the, um the vaporized cannabis, when you look at it afterwards, it's like toasted flowers, and for me, that was always very sad to,
Yep.
look at it, and you're like, "Oh, man, I waste."
That's a true cannabis lover when you're like, I'm sad. But
I'm sad because I've ruined these beautiful buds, and that's real, though, because
yeah.
110% the entourage effect of all the cannabinoids, all the flavonoids, all the terpenoids, that's what makes cannabis so amazing. Each strain has its own unique recipe, and that's why all of us, we have our own chemical makeup. That's why one strain affects me differently than it affects you, and it may be more conducive to my chemical makeup than it is yours.
Mm.
So, um,
And going
in
going back to the contaminants as well,
yes, sorry.
one of the things I learned about the cannabis plant from a very experienced grower was that hemp and cannabis just suck up everything in the soil. So
Yeah,
heavy
related.
metals, chemical compound, fertilizers, whatever it is, that plant will just suck it up out of the ground. And if you eat it, smoke, or do whatever, those compounds are in there somewhere.
100%, including heavy metals. My friend, he is the director of cultivation for Jacana. When he set up their outdoor grow in Jamaica, hemp was used. They look at the land, they plant hemp to remediate the soil, to get all that nastiness out of there. And you're 100% correct. And heavy metals is one of the major issues. Um, for me, as I started to say earlier, medical cannabis should be grown indoors under the strictest protocols with all the preventative maintenance equipment in place so there's no any contaminants used in the process. That is going to give a pure end product of flower. If you extract it, that is going to be pure. Should we allow cannabis to be grown with contaminants as far as pesticides, fungicides, herbicides for the commercial growers to be viable? That's going down the exact same road as big tobacco, and look how many years it took people to realize, "Oh, all these chemicals we're putting in tobacco are now killing us." So why would we do that, especially with a medicine? And I feel like why would we do that recreational as well? Because, the bottom line is it's gonna catch up with you. Um, are you gonna be able to grow cannabis in a greenhouse without that stuff? Absolutely not. That's why I say medical cannabis needs to be grown indoors. It's a controlled laboratory environment. You're treating the air with things like photocatalytic oxidation, which is the same technology that's used in a surgical room when they open up your body to make sure no microbes or spores or anything gets in your body. So it's spending the money on those things, and it's having a horticulturalist that understands what the plant needs without addressing it with pesticides, fungicides, herbicides, even predatory other insects that I've seen people introduce into a garden. I worked in North Macedonia. I won't say the pharmaceutical manufacturer's name, but this was the most amazing $27 million facility that I've ever seen. And I thought, wow, these guys took all the steps, everything to make an amazing, indoor facility that they won't have to use any pesticides, fungus, anything. And they said they weren't. And when I went there, I saw that they had aphids and they were spraying the plants and they were discussing what predators to bring in to treat it. And I thought, wow, they really missed the mark. They didn't start out with tissue culture. They brought in clones that were dirty to begin with, which is 9 out of 10 times the case. Um, and
Oh, the
and
clone. So if I mean the clue is in the name, isn't it? The clone. If the clone is dirty or
when the mother plant
I was going to
started
say contaminated,
contaminated,
then
yes.
then the clone, then everything else is
100%,
go.
100%. Exactly. The only way you're going to, and you could still start from seed and still end up with, some issues. That's why I was saying it's the protocols, it's how you go, throughout the entire process to do it contaminant free. Is it easy? Absolutely not. Um, but
Where do you stand on the irradiation debate? My understanding is irradiated is very important for people with immune deficiencies. But for the rest of us, we we could we could probably do with non-radiated. But
absolutely.
from what you're saying, I don't know now. So what's your stance?
I agree, and as a patient myself, I always would look. I go into MedBud Wiki, I look to see where was my cannabis cultivated because I want it grown indoors, so I look to see I typically go for a Canadian producer, and not all of them are growing indoors, which is amazing because of, Canada's weather. Exactly, exactly. However, um so you start there, and then it tells you if it's irradiated or
Yeah.
non-irradiated. I always chose non-irradiated because I was like, I don't want my cannabis to be microwaved, and we have this idea of what irradiation does. And then, you know, because I'm obsessed with everything cannabis, I looked into it and I found out that in the UK, a doctor is actually required to prescribe irradiated cannabis to someone with immune deficiency, an
Yeah.
autoimmune deficiency. So when you think about it in those terms, that's a cleaner product for that patient who's not going to be able to deal with catching something through consuming its cannabis. So, and in a sense, if it's medical cannabis, even if it was grown in a completely laboratory environment without any pesticides or fungicides, because it's a plant, what the irradiation process does is it kills any microbes, and those are going to occur in a plant. So even if it was grown contaminant free, it would still need to be irradiated for that patient. So I had to go. Maybe it's a better product. Maybe it's a better product for me to consume.
Interesting.
I suffer from, arthritis in my neck and in my ankle and a foot and knee. I've had surgeries. Um, I don't have an immune deficiency. However, I do want to consume the cleanest, plant possible. And I never thought about it in those terms. So I think when you think about it in those terms and you realize, you know, what it's for,
Mm.
then maybe it's just that final cleaning step of providing the patient with the best end product possible.
Yeah, that's a different and I think a really interesting positive way of looking at it. So we're nearly done for time. So last question, just what are you up to? What are the plans for 25?
Um, Hoping to work with a pharmaceutical manufacturer that does it right, that is patient-centric, that it's it's not about the cash, it's about getting cannabis to the people, especially the people that need it. one of the highlights of my career was in 2019 working with the chief minister of Uttarakhand. We didn't get cannabis legalized, we got hemp legalized, but that provided a new crop for those farmers in that area. I'm hoping to do something that's going to top that. And
And where did you say that was?
in Uttarakhand, India, right along the
Yes. See, I think I've never heard of that.
I worked for Green Agro Holdings that had operations in India and Sri Lanka, and I was very fortunate to travel the world, as an advocate for cannabis. We basically educate the government officials to realize that this is something that doesn't need to be illegal. Um, and beyond
Can you actually go in
beyond
hours, please? Can you can you give the report?
You know, that's really what needs to happen. I see on LinkedIn all the time people say, "Why can't we do this? Why can't we do that?" It's until the masses realize that, it's medicinally beneficial, that it's palliative, that not only that, but the social and economic benefits are amazing, and that it actually reduces crime because now you've taken something that was illegal and made it accessible and legal. So the crime that was attached to it before, criminals selling it, no longer exists. So, in my opinion, maybe all drugs should be legal.
Well,
That's
Eddie,
topic for a further
I think
discussion.
on that, I think that's probably the best way that we can wrap this up because you've just sort of don't hang up, but I'm going to stop the recording. And that was absolutely amazing. So thank you.
My pleasure.